When I collapsed at work, the doctors dialed my parents. They never showed. Instead, my sister tagged me in a picture. Family day without the drama. I stayed silent. A few days later, still weak and strapped to machines, I noticed 74 missed calls and a text from my dad. "We need you. Answer now." I didn't hesitate. I'd felt something was off for weeks, but I kept pushing through like always. It wasn't the first time I brushed aside the warnings, headaches, dizzy spells, that occasional squeeze in my chest. The truth was, I didn't think I had the luxury to slow down. Not when I was helping cover Mom's car note. Not when Melissa pinged me every other day for just a small loan. And certainly not when Dad acted like his overdue mortgage was somehow my job to fix. That's the part no one outside sees. They scroll past the picture-perfect family photos and assume everything's fine. They don't know what it's like growing up as the only son, always playing background in your own house. My sisters, Melissa and Paige, could wreck a car and somehow still get applauded for learning an important lesson. I once won a statewide engineering award and all Mom said was, "Oh nice. Did you thank your teacher?" At some point, I stopped craving recognition. I just wanted something back, anything. Maybe just gratitude. But I knew better. So I worked. I worked weekends. I paid bills that weren't mine. And I convinced myself it was fine, until that Monday afternoon. I was halfway through prepping slides for a big client when I stood to grab a folder from the printer. Then nothing. Darkness. When I came to, there were beeping machines, harsh fluorescent lights, sticky leads across my chest, a nurse adjusting the drip. It felt unreal, like a movie scene, except it wasn't. It wasn't stress, or dehydration, or even exhaustion. It was a cardiac event. The doctor said I was lucky it happened at work. Someone had called 911 instantly. My coworkers were the only reason I was still breathing. The hospital team was incredible, professional, kind. And when they realized no one had come to sit by me for hours, they told me they'd already reached out to my emergency contacts, my parents. I waited. For 2 full days I waited. No calls. No visits. Nothing. On the 3rd day, I woke from a nap and checked my phone, hoping maybe the signal had glitched. Just one notification. A tag on Instagram. Melissa. A photo of her, Paige, and our parents smiling around a picnic table by the lake. Mom had even made her famous deviled eggs. The caption gutted me worse than the heart attack. Family day without the drama. They even tagged me, like it was some inside joke. Like I wasn't lying in a hospital bed while they laughed over potato salad. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen until it went dark. Something inside me broke that day, not loud, not furious. Just quiet and final, like a door shutting for good. I kept recovering slowly. The doctors ran tests, monitored my heart. I barely spoke. Still no word from my family. Until 4 days later. That's when I woke to 74 missed calls and a text from my dad. "We need you. Answer now." No apology. No how are you. Just demands. I don't know what I expected, but I didn't hesitate. I sat up, still weak, still tethered to machines. And instead of calling them back, I called someone else. I stared at Dad's message for a long moment. "We need you. Answer now." For silent days. 74 missed calls. And that's all they had to say. Not "Are you okay?" Not "We're worried." Just that. I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel hurt. Just this flat calm. The kind that replaces whatever emotions used to show up in moments like this. Then I remembered a number. One I hadn't dialed in ages. Saved under a name I'd never deleted. Gramps. I hadn't called him in months. Not because we weren't close, but because he hated how my family treated me. And I'd been too ashamed to admit he'd been right all along. But that morning, I called. He answered on the 2nd ring, like he'd been waiting. He didn't ask what happened. Just, "Which hospital?" That was it. No hesitation. No judgment. Just action. Like I mattered. Something I hadn't felt in years. He arrived 40 minutes later. Same windbreaker. Same old watch he'd worn since I was a kid. Same expression. Like nothing shocked him anymore, but he was always prepared. He sat down, looked me over, and said, "So they finally broke you too, huh?" I didn't even ask how he knew. I just nodded. He stayed all day, talked to my nurse, asked real questions, quietly paid for a test my insurance denied, without making it a thing. Then he pulled out a tablet and started untangling the financial mess I'd been running on autopilot. We combed through everything. My name was tied to 5 loans, 3 credit cards, 2 utilities, and even a car insurance policy for a vehicle I didn't drive. It was so routine I hadn't realized how bad it was. Every time they hit a snag, I'd just step in, because I thought that's what family meant. Fill the holes, expect nothing back. But the truth was they expected it. And when I couldn't, I became the problem, the drama. Gramps helped me make a list. Every account. Every connection. Then we shut them down one by one. The auto transfers to Melissa's account gone. She always claimed she was barely scraping by, but she'd been to Miami 3 times this year. Posting every trip. Paige's rent deposit canceled. Mom's car insurance. I removed my card and reset the password. The loan I co-signed for Melissa, the one she forgot to mention for months, I flagged it and filed fraud. Not to ruin her, but because I never agreed to be her backup forever. I was finished signing away pieces of myself for people who couldn't even show up when I was lying in a hospital bed. Gramps didn't say much, just gave this quiet little sigh now and then, like he was disappointed, but not surprised. He was the only person who ever laid it out plainly for me. That loyalty only matters depending on who you give it to. By the time he walked out that night, the calls had already doubled. I had to put my phone on silent. Mom had left voicemails pretending she had just found out what happened. Paige was sending texts in all caps like shouting through a screen would make me answer faster. Melissa had gone completely quiet, which in her world meant she was plotting something worse. Then another message came through from Dad. This is serious. Call me now. Everything is falling apart. Still not a word about the hospital. Not a single mention of what had happened to me. Just pure panic. Not for me, for themselves. They knew what was unraveling. The first domino had tipped, and they didn't realize I was the one who pushed it. I was still in that hospital bed when the collapse began. At first it was just the voicemails. 12, then 24, then so many I stopped even checking. Out of curiosity, I put one on speaker. It was Mom. She said, I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this isn't the way to do it. That was the tone. No fear. No concern. Just irritation, like she was mad the cash machine had stopped working. Then Melissa texted. No words at first, just a screenshot of her bank balance. $29. Followed by, what the hell is going on? Fix this. I stared at it, felt a spark of anger rise, then let it fade. It wasn't new. Just louder this time. Paige tried a softer tactic. Her message was long, emotional. She said she didn't understand the drama. That she loved us all. That she wanted peace. She ended with, please don't punish me for things I didn't do. Funny, since the last time we spoke she rolled her eyes when I said I couldn't co-sign another lease, called me difficult, and disappeared for 3 months. But it was my dad who finally crossed the line. He showed up at my apartment. Gramps had warned me. He'd seen Dad's car outside earlier, idling like he was waiting on a hostage exchange. I was still weak, not even able to walk without help, but that didn't stop him from staking out the place. I didn't respond. Later, a text came through. You're about to destroy everything we've built. I hope you know the damage you're causing. Everything we built. The arrogance in that sentence made me laugh out loud. I reread it just to be sure I hadn't imagined it. No apology, no acknowledgement of the hospital, no concern for why I was even there. Just fear. Fear of losing the control they'd clung to for too long. Then came Melissa's post. She uploaded a video. No sound, no narration, just a slow, dramatic walkthrough of my parents' house, completely gutted. Not just messy, evicted. The front door wide open. Living room empty. Dining table gone. Even the curtains stripped away. The caption, they took everything. And guess who let them? I watched it once, then pulled up my finance app. The mortgage had defaulted again. They'd drained the equity to wipe out Melissa's credit cards and bankroll Paige's business venture. A candle line or a boutique. I can't even remember. It failed within weeks. Not a single cent had gone to the mortgage. I had warned them last year. Just once. that if they didn't manage it better, I was done. They didn't believe me. So when I walked, the bank moved in. Gramps was there when I uncovered the paperwork. I didn't say much, just scrolled through, showing him the balances, the late fees, the notices that had been sent to their address instead of mine. He nodded once. Then he picked up the phone. Called his lawyer. Called an old friend in estate planning. Finally called his accountant, someone I didn't even know existed until that day. What I learned after that explained everything. My family hadn't only leaned on me. They'd been circling my grandfather too, especially once he retired. Paige suddenly taking him to brunch, something she never did. Melissa gifting him something for Christmas last year, the first time in a decade. Mom dropping hints in phone calls about what was fair. He saw it coming. He'd already moved everything, assets, trusts, properties, not to punish them, but to protect them from themselves. And now most of it was shifted into my name. Not as a prize, not as a gift, but because I was the only one who never asked. I had proven, painfully, that I could survive without it, that I didn't feel entitled. In his words, that made me the only one worthy. That night, Melissa showed up at the hospital. She wasn't on the visitor list, so security turned her away, but I saw her from the window. She paced the lot, phone pressed to her ear, sunglasses on even though the sun had already set, like she was bracing for a fight that never came. She left after 15 minutes. I figured that was the end of it. Then an hour later, another message. If you don't fix this, I swear to God you'll regret it. No emojis. No hashtags. Just that. And it landed differently than she intended. I didn't feel threatened. I didn't feel cornered. For the first time, I didn't feel anything at all. I wasn't the son anymore. Or the brother. Or the fixer. I was finally free. It started with a knock on my hospital door. I assumed it was a nurse. Instead, a staff member stepped in uneasy. There's a woman downstairs claiming she's your medical proxy, she said. She says she's your sister and needs to speak to your doctor immediately. I just stared. I hadn't listed anyone in my immediate family as an emergency contact, only my grandfather. I asked who it was. She checked her notes. Paige. I almost laughed. She hadn't texted in days. Hadn't visited. Hadn't acknowledged I was even in a hospital until I cut off her rent. And now she was trying to speak for me. I told them no one was authorized. The hospital agreed and had security escort her out before she got anywhere near me. I thought it was just Paige being dramatic. I was wrong. Hours later, Gramps came in carrying a manila envelope. He set it on my bed and sat down. Inside were printed emails between my parents and some small law firm I'd never heard of. They were exploring legal guardianship over me. I read it 3 times to be sure I understood. They were claiming I was unstable, erratic, maybe dealing with PTSD or a breakdown. They argued my recent financial choices showed emotional volatility. Their goal was clear. If they could get Dad named as a conservator, even temporarily, they could freeze the changes I had already made. Unlock accounts. Reopen credit. Reclaim control. They were trying to brand me incompetent. The same people who didn't even bother checking if I was alive 4 days earlier. I sat with it for a while. Gramps stayed calm. He told me it wasn't the first time. Years ago, when my uncle tried to walk away from the family for the same reasons, my parents had floated the same idea. Nothing came of it back then. But now, with real money at stake, they were actually moving forward. They weren't calling because they cared. They were calling because they were trapped. The rest of the day, I went quiet. Not in sadness. In focus. Something inside me locked into place. I had spent my entire life waiting for them to wake up, to see what I had given, maybe even to apologize. But they weren't waking up. They were rewriting the story, casting me as the villain. So I made a list, every account, every shared asset, every payment I had ever set up to help them. That evening my lawyer, the one Gramps introduced me to, showed up with the paperwork already prepared. The very next morning we filed. A cease and desist was issued against both of my sisters and my parents, blocking them from contacting any of my physicians or pretending to act as my medical proxies. I placed fraud alerts on every financial institution where I had ever shared access with family members. We locked down all property transfers tied to my name. Any attempt to move or sell an asset I had co-signed would automatically trigger a legal freeze. I even had HR reroute my direct deposits into a completely new bank account, hidden under a holding trust set up years ago by my grandfather's estate advisor. For the first time in my life, I felt protected. Then the next blow came. Paige uploaded a video. Her mascara was smeared, the lighting awful, and the shaky camera made it look raw and unpolished. It began with her sniffling and ended with her staring straight into the lens. She never used my name, but she didn't have to. "There's someone in our family going through a dark time," she said. "We're trying to help him, but he's pushing us away and hurting people. We don't want to lose him, but we can't let him tear down everything we've built." Everything we've built. There it was again. Like I had barged into their empire and flipped the breaker switch. The video spread quickly. Her friends filled the comments. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years sent cryptic texts. And even an old co-worker reached out asking if I was alright. Melissa reposted it with a heart emoji and the caption, "We're all praying for peace." Peace. But after trying to seize control of my life, my money, and even my health, they weren't praying for peace. They were praying I'd cave. I didn't. Instead, I shared something of my own. Just a single photo. Me in the hospital bed, sitting beside my grandfather. No caption, no hashtags, no drama. Just the quiet reminder. Silence isn't weakness. It's restraint. 2 hours later, Melissa called. I ignored it. Then she called again. Then Paige. Then my mother. All went unanswered. The last attempt was a text from my father. "We didn't want it to come to this. You're forcing us to do things we never wanted to do." They still believed they held control. They couldn't see what was coming. 2 days later, a letter was hand-delivered to the hospital in a pristine white envelope. For a brief second, I thought maybe it was something real, something human. It wasn't. It was legal. A notice of intent to pursue emergency conservatorship. I read it twice before speaking. They claimed I was mentally unfit to handle my own affairs. That cutting them off was proof of erratic behavior. The letter cited emotional distress, inability to manage obligations, and concerns from close family regarding my mental health following my cardiac event. They were trying to strip everything from me officially. I called my lawyer immediately. He wasn't surprised. He told me it was common in toxic families when someone dares to break the cycle of dependence. Their goal was to file fast, an emergency petition, so I wouldn't have time to appear in court. If they caught the timing right, a judge could grant temporary conservatorship without me present. What they didn't know was that Gramps and his legal team were already ahead. We submitted a preemptive response with notarized statements from my doctors confirming I was mentally sound and fully capable of making decisions. We attached proof of income, communication records, and a letter from my employer confirming I had voluntarily taken medical leave, but remained actively employed. The case was tossed before it ever reached the docket. Their lawyer quietly withdrew, likely realizing he'd been fed a sob story, and didn't want the professional fallout. But that didn't stop them. The smear campaign began. I started getting strange messages. An old girlfriend messaged saying she was sorry to hear I was struggling. A former colleague emailed to ask if I needed help getting back on my feet. That's when it clicked. They were rewriting the narrative, casting my hospitalization as a breakdown, my silence as evidence I'd lost control, while presenting themselves as the selfless ones trying to save me. And maybe it would have worked if they weren't so sloppy. Melissa couldn't stay quiet. Paige couldn't resist attention. She posted again, this time polished. Emotional lighting, soft filters, piano music. She talked about how mental illness doesn't always look obvious, how invisible wounds can be the hardest, and how she just wanted her brother back. Again, no name. But she didn't need to say it. Everyone knew. The comments poured in. People praising her strength. Messages like, "You're so brave." "Praying for your family." "He's lucky to have you." And then everything turned. One user posted a screenshot. A side-by-side of Melissa's family day without the drama caption with Paige's new tearful video. The comment read, "So where was all this concern when he was actually in the hospital?" It exploded. The sympathy flipped into anger. Strangers started digging through their old posts. Melissa had tagged me in that Family Day post while I was still in the ICU. Paige had tweeted years back mocking moochers faking trauma. My mom had shared birthday dinner photos just a day after doctors called her about my collapse. The internet doesn't forget. And this time it didn't forgive. Jen, an old high school friend now working in media, reached out. She told me she'd always sensed something was wrong with my family, even back then. And she was right. The lies could only stretch so far before snapping. Paige's boutique tanked. Customers demanded refunds. Influencers dropped her collaborations overnight. Melissa's sponsorships disappeared within days. One brand even unfollowed her after issuing an apology. My dad wasn't spared either. A client saw the viral threads and confronted him in a meeting. He got defensive. HR intervened. By the end of the week, he was fired. The empire they built on lies was collapsing. That's when my mom finally cracked. She texted me, "Please, can we talk?" Just those 5 words. No excuses, no guilt trips. I stared at it for a long time. But what I felt wasn't satisfaction. It was distance. Like those words came from someone I'd once known in a life that didn't exist anymore. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my notes app and made a list of everything left to cut, cancel, and close. They had gone too far, not just with me, but with the story they tried to sell the world. And they still didn't understand. I wasn't angry. I was finished. I thought they'd stop after the conservatorship failed, after the public backlash, after the sponsors, jobs, and reputations crumbled. But I should have known better. Selfish people don't quit. They pivot. When I was finally discharged, still weak but able to walk, Gramps picked me up. He handed me a drink and said we'd stay at his place for a few days. I was glad. My apartment felt too close to them. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You should come by the house. We need to talk. Urgently. Paige." I deleted it. 2 hours later, Jen called urgent. She told me to check Facebook. There they were, Melissa, Paige, and my mom standing outside the old house. A U-Haul in the background. My dad holding a box. They looked devastated. Tears, messy clothes. The performance of grief. Melissa wrote the caption. "Losing everything hurts, especially when it's because your own blood turned on you. But we forgive him. He's still our brother. We just want him home before it's too late." The comments were split, half pity, half fury. I wouldn't have cared until I saw the last picture. Paige holding a framed childhood photo of me. Caption: "We're keeping a room ready. Family is forever." It felt like emotional ransom. A staged production to paint me as the villain while they played martyrs willing to forgive. The next day, I received another letter, this one from the county clerk. Inside was a handwritten will. Not from my grandfather. From my father. It had been drafted a week after their failed conservatorship. It divided his remaining assets, few as they were, to family members who maintained unity. At the bottom, scrawled in shaky ink, "Colton is disinherited until he returns to this family and reconciles." I laughed. Not because I wanted anything from him, I never did, but because their final move was the same as every other. A trap. A last attempt to drag me back into their system. The message was obvious. Fall back in line or be erased. What they didn't realize was, I wanted to be erased. So my lawyer drafted a reply. A legal waiver of any claim to the estate. A permanent no-contact order. A signed document removing them as emergency contacts or next of kin for anything tied to me. Simple. Clear. Final. They tried guilt. They tried money. They tried legacy. I chose peace. 2 weeks later, Gramps and I moved out of state. He wanted to see the mountains again. We bought a cabin outside a quiet little town. I took a remote job, cut back my hours, started reading again. Breathing again. Occasionally, someone from the past reaches out. A cousin, an old neighbor, asking what really happened. I never explain. Because people like Melissa, Paige, and my parents are storytellers. In their version, they're always the wounded ones. Always the betrayed. Always the victims left behind by someone cruel and broken. Let them keep their story. I have something better. The truth. And peace. And peace is worth far more than being loved by people who only love you when you're useful.